Hey, welcome in.
Welcome to the Arrowhead Addict podcast.
We are here coming to you live. The Kansas City Chiefs are going to the Super Bowl. You only win a Super Bowl 2 times every 5 years, right?
Oh!
The warm-up act is over. Let's bring in Melissa Etheridge, massive Chiefs fan. Melissa.
Super Bowl champion, 2-time Pro Bowler, and Trent Green. Trent Green, how you doing?
Hey, what's going on, guys?
He picked it up! He picked it up! He's gonna score! And we'll see you next week. But until then, as always, go Chiefs.
Welcome. This is Wacky Wednesday on the Arrowhead Addict channel. I'm Adam Best, joined as always by Sterling Holmes, with producer Richard doing his thing behind the scenes. Sterling, my man, how are you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm good.
Better weather there?
Yeah,
right?
yeah. It's 60 and sunny. I mean, I love this. Smiles. Good weather brings smiles from Sterling.
I just took a walk. It's 72 outside. And that's like San Diego weather is my shit. 70 and sunny. Give that to me every day. I know that's not possible, but wouldn't it be nice?
Yeah.
Not a lot of big news going on in the kingdom. I think the combine, with that revving up, we'll hear more comments from Andy Reid and Brett Beach. We've heard a little bit from them already, but we're already back in it. We barely had both of our feet out, and now we've got 1 foot back in. And the NFL, it never stops, especially when you're a Chiefs fan. Not necessarily a bad thing. You could be one of these teams that you're done by Thanksgiving and you just hibernate until March. That's no fun. Right?
Yeah, it's just no fun, but I wouldn't mind another week or two off.
Yeah. I mean, we don't Chiefs content creators, we don't really get to hit the snooze button, do we?
No, we do not.
It's just year round. Got a great show for you guys today. Last week, we looked at the offense. We graded the offense and kind of set the table for free agency and the draft. This week, we're going to do the second half of that and do a deep dive on the defense and some of those free agents and how that's looking going into the offseason. But before we get to all that, we've got a little bit of business.
Yeah, baby. It is basketball season, and do we have a something for you? We'll have a little cyst for you because, baby, it is time. It's time to have some fun with one of the leading sports apps, and you can play now in your state. Do you want to win up to 1,000 times your money? Because you can with Underdog. Millions of fans have already won billions of dollars making picks right there on Underdog. Their app has over 100K 5-star reviews and millions of players. It is extremely easy. Higher or lower, you make the call. Download the Underdog app today and sign up using code Arrowhead Addict to unlock a special offer up to $1,000 in bonus cash when you make your first deposit. Join in on the fun. It is that easy when you sign up with the promo code Arrowhead Addict. Must be 18 plus, 19 plus in Alabama, Nebraska, 19 plus in Colorado for some games, 21 plus in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Voting in Colorado. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncbgambling.org. In Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342. In New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY.
That was good. You had a minor bobble when you caught the punt.
Yeah,
you still ran it back. I mean, it's a new read. What are you going to do? They threw something totally new, right?
It is tough.
Well, you ready to dig into the defensive offseason primer? That's a mouthful.
I would absolutely love to.
So, like I said earlier, with the combine upon us, it's the right moment to dig in here. We're going to grade each position group based on not only performance, but kind of strength of the overall unit going forward. You game with that game plan?
I love it. Let's do it.
All right. So some pre-discussion thoughts. These are the same as last week, but I just want to make sure everyone remembers. And if you weren't with us last week, you kind of have the full outlook. So the salary cap spiked again from $255.4 million up to, this is a range, $277.5 million to $281.5 million. So that's going to exceed projections by around 5 or 10 million. And if you heard Brett Beach's recent comments, it sounds like maybe that puts Trey Smith in play. We'll see. Nate Taylor did some from The Athletic did some reporting around that. Buyer beware of injury discount stickers. I would throw Hollywood Brown into that camp. I would throw DJ Humphries into that camp. Those kind of guys. Dynasties are not forged by being sentimental. And lastly here, sneaky moves often move the needle more than sexy ones. My brother and I talked about that the other day. Even with the sexiest moves the Chiefs have done, Tyrann Mathieu, Joe Thuney, if you're lucky, you get market value or a little bit more. If you're unlucky, you get Sammy Watkins or worse, right? And where you get the real surplus value is Jerick McKinnon, is Donovan Smith, is Juju Smith-Schuster or Drew Tranquil, those kind of guys that are underappreciated and underpaid. So we're having some technical issues, but I think they're better. Let's start with edge.
Let's do it.
So the starter here, George Karlaftis and Mike Dana, quasi-starter, right?
He's a half starter. He's a very nice rotational piece.
He is like your third guy. But he's a fixture. So I threw him in there with the starters. And defensive linemen, especially edges, rotate so much that, you kind of have 4 starters there, or 3 at least. The key free agent here is Charles Omenihu. After 2 years in Kansas City, where he missed a lot of time because of suspension and that ACL injury, he is now hitting the market again. Sterling, what are your overall thoughts on this group?
Yeah, it wasn't great. Honestly, it was a huge disappointment, quite frankly, from what we thought. Obviously, George Karlaftis was really solid, but if the Chiefs did not have George Karlaftis, this edge group would be just brutal. Charles Omenihu is solid, very good when he came back, obviously, but he's not been able to play a full season, whether it's because of injuries or suspension. At some point, you cannot count on Charles Omenihu, which is a huge bummer. Mike Dana, obviously, I like what he brings as a rotational piece. He's somewhat took a step back this year, which was not ideal, but he still is a nice piece to have. I guess just as a whole, the edge group, especially with FAU took a step forward, but he didn't play a lot of snaps. And I actually was a little surprised that we didn't see more FAU because I did like what he brought in the limited amount of snaps that he did have. Obviously, Joshua Uche was brought in, never made anything happen. I think as a whole, I would say the edge group gets about a C-, but I do think that George Karlaftis is doing a lot of the heavy lifting in that regard. Again, Omenihu's really good, but he can't play a full season, it seems like.
He can't. And I was impressed by him at times. Can you hear me?
Kind of, yeah. It came out very wild at first. Yeah.
It's good now?
I think it's okay now.
Oh my gosh. Okay. We're gonna push through it and try to figure it out as we go. This group, Charles Omenihu, never really lived up to the promise of Charles Omenihu. He wasn't bad, had some big moments. I think when the signing was made, I expected a little bit more. But of course, the ACL injury, we weren't expecting that. We were hoping for more like 2 or 4 game suspension when the Chiefs signed him. They kind of got burned and got that 6-game suspension. Now, the NFL is going to do what it does. You kind of just have to live with that. On FAU, I did see some flashes. He's more of kind of that like pocket pusher, good against the run, might get an occasional TFL. Again, not a super quick win guy, but I think he might be a useful piece going forward. He's never going to be a first-round edge. He's probably never even going to be George Karlaftis. And George Karlaftis was very good in the postseason for the most part. He had some huge splash plays. He even had some fast wins, which is where I think he still has some room to grow. I'm with you. I'm going to grade them in the C range. I think they got enough from this group to do what needed to be done, but I still think there's room for improvement. So let's run through some potential targets here. Keep in mind that the Spags prototype is really kind of bigger guys, good against the run. We're talking no one lighter than like 260. Is that fair? He likes some length there too. I mean, Karlaftis' arms are on the shorter side, but he likes some big, long, good against the run. That's why Joshua Uche didn't really play in Kansas City. I don't know if there's a communication breakdown, Led Zeppelin style, between the general manager and the defensive coordinator, but I think that's why Uche never saw the field. So let's run through some free agents. I haven't really dug into the draft yet. I don't know if you have at this position. I've been looking more at offense so far, but loaded draft class is word on the street. And then some interesting free agents here. The first one is Chase Young. And I can't believe he's only 25 years old. That's crazy. It feels like he's been in the league for a long time. And I think if you just kind of etch-a-sketch, like shake the etch-a-sketch and forget what was promised in Chase Young when he came out of the draft, you can kind of look at him as a really good player. Great against the run, solid pass rusher. And I think now that he's moving past all these injuries, there might be more room for upside. So I like what I saw in New Orleans last year. He might have been the best player on that defense. It really just comes down to price here. But if Charles Omenihu, for some reason, gets out of their price range and he's more affordable, I think that would be a nice alternative. And then there are a couple ring chase options. And I don't know where these two guys, where their heads are at, but I think putting in a call would be wise if you're Veach, just to see if they want that Super Bowl stamp on their resume, on their Hall of Fame resume. So Khalil Mack, first of all, major bounce back year last year. I still think he could be pricey, but he's 34. 34 years old is ancient. You never know. But Von Miller got a huge contract at 33. So he's probably going to be out of their price range. I would still call if I were Veach, just in case. He just was awesome last year, both pass and run. The next one might be a little bit more realistic. DeMarcus Lawrence. So last year he had a Liz Frank injury and a defensive coordinator swap. His defensive coordinator, Dan Quinn, goes to Washington. They bring in Mike Zimmer. I don't think is as good for him. And then he has a Liz Frank injury. So last year his PFF grade was all the way down to 53.9. But the previous season, it was at 91.3. And that's just like one indicator that this is kind of a fluky year. But if at 32 years old, you can squint and see a guy that's been stuck on that Dallas Cowboys franchise that has no interest in seriously competing in the postseason. And you could see him being not only hungry for a championship run, but you could see him having a bounce back season. So what do you think about those guys? Do you think – I'm a little worried about Brett Beach drafting defensive line. Is that founded or unfounded?
No, I think it's a good call. I mean, he's not been great in that regard. Karlaftis has probably been his best pick on the defensive line. Yeah, I don't know, man. Those three guys are interesting and also have a lot of questions in their own way. Khalil Mack is the best option, I would say, but Khalil Mack's also the oldest. And you're right. I think Khalil Mack's still going to get a fairly large contract. DeMarcus Lawrence, I think, yeah, you could make this as the outlier season, but also with the injury coupled with the age, you're really, really counting on a bounce back. And that makes me nervous. Chase Young is okay. I actually think Chase Young is ass in the run game. I don't think he cares. I think Chase Young is just brutal. PFF backs that up too.
I thought he was good in the run game. I mean, we'll have to
a 54 PFF grade in the run game, as well as what I've seen with my eyes, does not scream great from Chase Young. I mean, I wouldn't I guess hate if Chase Young was a Chief, but I just don't know what that contract would even look like. He just doesn't seem like he fits what KC typically likes to do in that regard. Again, it's difficult. I think at least a edge rush from the first 3 rounds. But I don't know if Menahu's coming back for another year or not. But on those 3 names, again, Khalil Mack would be the best one, but I just don't think the price is going to be right for KC.
On Chase Young, I forget who it was, if it was Nick Underhill or whoever it was. I go and listen sometimes to the people that cover other teams. And the book on Chase Young was that his effort and his strength and just his overall ability to stifle the run and hold up and set the edge was much improved. So I don't know. Maybe PFF's right in this one. Maybe they're wrong, but that's where I got that tidbit. Let's segue here to defensive tackle. The starter, of course, Chris Jones. I actually have heard some calling for Chris Jones to get traded again. I'm like, oh my God, are we doing this? Why do we do this every 2 or 3 years? Why must we put ourselves through this? It's just, but I think anytime there's a Super Bowl and he doesn't get, a sack or 2, that's just going to be what people say. And, he happened to hurt his neck. Quick aside, he hurt his neck on the tush push, lining up sideways.
What an absolutely, that was one of the dumbest things I have seen the Chiefs. Of all the things in that Super Bowl, that may have been the dumbest. And the reason being is, why the bleep would you do that with Chris Jones? Like, if you think that you're trying to get something creative by putting a guy sideways, why the hell would you use your best player defensively? Like, I'm not trying to be mean to a guy like, let's say, like Mike Pennell, but wouldn't you want to use 1, a bigger bodied guy, and 2, a guy that you could, if, again, God forbid you would hate it, but if he were to get injured, it wouldn't be Chris? Like, that was just one of the most absurd, asinine situations I have seen.
You're paying Chris Jones over $30 million a year, and he's kind of the sacrificial lamb there. I get what you're saying about Derek Nottie and Mike Pennell. You care about those guys too, but they literally make a fraction of what Chris Jones makes. He's a cornerstone franchise player. I think they were just desperate to try to stop it. I don't know if that's something Joe Cullen and the defensive coaching staff wanted him to do, or if that was just Chris being Chris, like trying to pull out all the stops in the Super Bowl. But it definitely didn't work. And then he hurts his knee later on in the game. So I'm not making excuses for the guy, but it just I don't think he was at his full potential. And then we have quite a few key free agents here. We have Tershawn Wharton, who I really like what I saw from Turk, especially in the playoffs. I think he looks like himself now, a year fully removed from that ACL surgery. And then you have Mike Pennell and Derek Nottie. I think it's been fun having these guys. You got to appreciate their long tenures in Kansas City. But boys to men, we're at the end of the road, aren't we?
Yeah, I don't know, man. I think it was honestly for the interior defensive line, I'd give him a B+ this year. Chris Jones didn't have quite the season that we expected, if we're being transparent. I think Turk Wharton, this is one where I think PFF was completely wrong on. I thought Turk had a really good year. I really did. At least I thought he fit really well in what the Chiefs defensive line was doing. By the way, Phantom, hilarious comment. Phantom, Assa 9, Assa 10, Assa 11. That got a nice little chuckle from me. I like that one. Good comment. Leader in the clubhouse for comments so far is Phantom. Derek Nottie didn't do much this year. I don't mind Derek Nottie. I don't. If he's back, he's back. He's a good depth piece. He's a fine depth piece, and I think he's a great guy. From all accounts, I love what he does with dogs, but we maybe need a dog on the defensive line in the game, right? We need someone who can make a play, and Derek Nottie doesn't really make many plays. Mike Pennell is good in the run game. If you want to bring him back for that regard, I just feel like him and Derek Nottie are a little redundant, and I think Mike Pennell is just the better player personally. I think Tershawn Wharton's a big piece here. I really do. I think Turk Wharton brought a lot to the table this year. I thought he played nice with Chris Jones. I actually thought when Charles Omenihu came back and we saw Turk Wharton snap cat and go down, I think Turk Wharton's a good rotational piece. I should say it that way. I don't think Turk Wharton's like your every down defensive lineman. You line him up with Chris Jones the same amount. But I think if Turk Wharton can play 50% of snaps in the game, 40% of snaps in the game, he's a really viable player there because he's really good at getting after the quarterback, super athletic, can go inside out if you need to. I would like to see the Chiefs bring back Turk Wharton. Don't know what his contract would look like on the free agent market. I have no idea. No idea. I couldn't even begin to tell you what a jumping off point would be. But I would like to see Turk Wharton back in KC because I thought he really took a step forward this year.
He's one of the 2 free agents I would prioritize. I'd like to see Tershawn Wharton back. I think there's even more room for him to grow. And my hope is that because he plays alongside Chris Jones and George Karlaftis, that maybe you have some people looking at him and saying, what would he look like when he wasn't playing next to Chris Jones? And that's a fair criticism, but in Kansas City, we know what he looks like next to Chris Jones, and he looks pretty good. With Mike Pennell and Derek Nottie, I just think at some point you have to find a new answer, and there's going to be even more fall off. We've seen it, I think, more from Derek Nottie than Mike Pennell, but they're getting a little long in the tooth. A little bit of pushback on Chris Jones. I know the sack numbers aren't there. I mean, one of my hobby horses is that we're too obsessed with sacks. People keep saying, well, Trey Smith gave up 0 sacks. Well, sacks are kind of a quarterback stat, right? How many pressures did he give up? What was his pass rush win rate? You got to look a little bit deeper. And Chris Jones at Christmas time, when he went out with that injury, he led the NFL in pressures.
Yes.
He led the NFL in pressures despite, I think he was, some people have pushed back when I call him the most double team player in the league. But if you take out guys who are primarily run defenders, he basically is the most double team player in the league, especially someone who's playing that high volume of snaps. So, I mean, I think he was right there once again. You'd like to see him finish some more, but sometimes he's creating opportunities for George Karlaftis. Whatever George Karlaftis had, 10 sacks or whatever, he probably has half of that if he doesn't play as Chris Jones.
No, I thought he was great. I thought Chris Jones was great. I just think he took a slight step back. He was still a top 3 interior defensive lineman this year. I mean, Cam Hayward honestly may have had the best year of any interior defensive lineman. That guy was insane for the Steelers at his age. Crazy. That's all I was saying. Again, I think Chris Jones is great. I think he is still an elite player. I think that it was just a slight underperformance, in my opinion, of a slight underperformance this year than what we've seen from him in the past. That's all it was.
Understood. I get a little touchy on Chris because I feel like people don't really understand him because they think he should be a 20 sack a year player, like he's an edge. And he just gets a lot of criticism and held under a microscope the way like nobody else on the roster does. I don't really
get paid that much, of course. It's always how it is. If you are the highest paid player at your position, you are going to be held under the microscope, and you should be.
Yeah, but I mean, we make excuses for Patrick Mahomes. We make excuses for Travis Kelce. We definitely make excuses for Justin Reed and Jawan Taylor. All these other guys that are among the top 10 or 12 paid guys at their position.
I don't know when I've ever made an excuse for Jawan Taylor.
Well, people do. But I hear what you're saying. When you're one of the best paid guys, I've always agreed with this. This is why I've been critical of Justin Reed. When you're one of the highest paid players on the roster, you got to play like one of the highest paid players on the roster. My grade here, I'm going to give him a solid B. I saw enough to where I'm not really like worried about this unit going forward. I think Chris, as long as he's still in his prime or somewhat close to it, him and maybe just 3 warm bodies is better than most teams have. So potential targets here, old friend alert, Jaron Reed. I thought this was really interesting. I watched quite a bit of Seattle games just because of fantasy and when they tend to play in the afternoon when there's not as much going on. You know what I mean? So I thought Jaron Reed was pretty good. And I went to PFF and I looked at his pass rushing grade, And his last 2 seasons in Seattle, I don't know if it's the Pacific Northwest in that dude or what, but he was pretty good last year. So
He's only been good in Seattle.
I know. Is it the all fish diet? What is it with this guy?
I just don't think. I mean, it's the same. A lot of the same staff as when he was still here, right? It would have been some of the same staff when
Joe Cullen wasn't here.
Yeah, I don't know, man.
But Spags already got a crack at him, so
Yeah.
you don't think it's likely.
Yeah, I know.
If we're gonna go with an old, hear me out. Calais Campbell, ring chase, 38, but the guy just has more grown man strength, old man strength than anybody I've probably ever seen in my life. And he's not the pass rusher he used to be, but he's still, I don't know how he's still one of the best run stoppers in the game, and he pushes the pocket. And it's not a bad idea. I mean, what if he wants to come in, play alongside Chris Jones to extend his career and try to get a ring to again, that Hall of Fame resume. It looks, a Lombardi on that resume always looks good to voters.
I would love it. I would love Calais Campbell in Kansas City, even at his age. I would have loved him last year. And he was the number 1 ranked interior defensive lineman in the run game, according to PFF. He was the 7th ranked overall defensive tackle, according to PFF. And you're right. I mean, the eye test backs that up. At his age, him and Cam Hayward at their ages are just insane what they've done. But Calais Campbell, I'd be a big fan of him coming to KC. I think he would fit exactly what the Chiefs are trying to do.
You have a strong draft class here too. I guess I feel a little bit better about Veach drafting defensive tackles than edges. Maybe that's not the way to look at it, but I like Turk Wharton. So let's move on to linebacker. This is going to be really interesting. Starters, the incumbents that are coming back. We have Drew Tranquil. I think he's been a bargain, and Leo Chanel. So who I'd like to see still get on the field more than he does. He's really a unique chess piece for the Chiefs because sometimes they use him as their 3rd linebacker in base. Sometimes they use him as a 4th or 5th defensive lineman, like a stand-up edge. So you have those 2 guys. They're definitely coming back. And then the second biggest question of the offseason, but I really think he's an equally big question because I know Trey Smith is more highly regarded and more coveted as a free agent, but Nick Bolton is the leader of this Chiefs defense. He is the brain on the field, the extension of Spags that helps Spags do what he does with this defense. So I think he's very important. What are your thoughts on potentially retaining him or letting him walk, and just overall in this group?
Yeah, I like this linebacker group. They're probably about a B or a B plus is kind of my takeaway this year. They were really, really good. Drew Tranquil really struggled, and Nick Bolton struggled early on this year, but then they both turned it on and turned into the same guys that we knew and love or know and love. Leo's interesting. I really like Leo. PFF loves Leo Chanel. I like Leo a lot, but I think he's playing about the perfect amount of snaps. When we see him playing more, it feels like at times he gets overexposed. I don't think he's ready to take over that middle linebacker spot for Nick Bolton. I know it's silly. I know everyone else was also a backup, but he did not look good week 18 against the Broncos in that role. That was not good. That was bad. I like Leo a lot, and I think he is a chess piece. I think he's great in his current role. I think he's perfect in his current role. I mean, he is the premier player of what he does. That amount of snaps seems to fit him just outstanding. Really like Drew Tranquil. Again, I was critical on him early in the year because I go, okay, he got the contract, and now what the hell just happened? And then he turned back to the same Drew Tranquil we expected him to be. You know my thoughts on Nick Bolton. I think Nick Bolton is such a valuable piece to this Chiefs defense. He is the brain. Can't imagine the Chiefs moving on from Justin Reed and Nick Bolton just from an intelligence standpoint. Nick Bolton is one of the most intelligent players in the NFL. I don't know what that contract's going to look like. You know, if it's 12.5 mil, I think he's for sure back in KC. If you're getting 14 and 15 mil range, I think he's probably playing elsewhere. The linebacker market is just wild. There's just a pretty wide range of players. If you go from the number 1, it's like 20 mil a year. You go down to like number 5, it's like 12.5 million per year. I mean, there is a big difference in AAV. I don't know how other teams view Nick Bolton. I don't know. I don't have a great grasp on that. But I know the Chiefs really value Nick Bolton.
I think the rest of the league understands that there's Fred Warner in a tier of his own. He's a one of one. There's no one else like him that can do everything he can do. Especially, I mean, he's like an old school Ray Lewis level linebacker in a time where those guys shouldn't exist because of spread and everything that the teams are doing that they didn't used to do, all the motion and whatnot to kind of open up the field. And then you have Roquan Smith and another tier. And then I think Nick Bolton is in that maybe like third tier of B+ players.
You know, it's him, it's JOK, it's what's his name from the Colts,
Dre Greenlaw.
Dre Greenlaw as well, and Patrick Queen's probably in that category as well. Again, I just think Nick Bolton, they have not drafted his replacement, and I don't think that full replacement's on the team. I know people want to say Drew Tranquill, but he's not as good in the run game. Like that's a big difference, I think. So I think the Chiefs would be hard pressed to move on from Nick Bolton, even if the numbers start to get a little crazy. I just think they're going to be in that bidding war.
There are some other options here, but kind of where I'm at is in alignment with you. I look at Drew Tranquill and I just think he's not the run stopper. He's smaller. Does he have the mental ability to lead the defense? Yeah, he's also one of the smartest guys in the league. Actually won the league chess tournament among players. And so he and Nick Bolton are as sharp as they get, but he's just not Nick Bolton from a frame standpoint. And then I do want to see a little bit more of Leo Chanel, but I hear your case that he's one of the best specialists in the NFL, that he's kind of a unique chess piece that not very many teams have. You hear him talked about that by people all across the league. Nate Tice talks about him all the time, that he's just a fun piece to trot out there in certain situations. I want us to keep Nick Bolton because my plan, if you handed over the Chiefs to me, which you wouldn't, but hear me out, would be bring back Nick Bolton. And with Nick Bolton and Spags and Chris Jones and Trent McDuffie and some of the other continuity with supporting players, the defense is set. The defense is going to, with that crew, I am certain Spags can get the most of them and keep them above average. That way you can turn your almost entire attention to the offense, which looked just like a train wreck by the end of the playoffs. So I'm all for bringing him back. I don't think you can bring back him and Trey Smith the way the Chiefs kind of budget and do things. We shall see. If they can't afford him, here are some other options. There's a couple, and it also sounds like Brett Beach likes this draft class. So Dre Greenlaw, who we previously mentioned, 27 from the 49ers, really good player, did have that freak Achilles injury that Chiefs fans will remember, played a huge role in that Super Bowl, but he seems to be totally back from that and looking like his old self. So there's that option. There's Tyrell Dodson, who's been with the Bills and the Dolphins. He's kind of a coverage ace who's had his moments versus the run. I don't really see him as a guy. I don't know if I see either of these guys who can kind of be the downhill thumper that Nick Bolton is. I mean, he's just one of the best downhill thumpers in the league. He's great against the run. He's one of the hardest hitters in the league. He's just going to be hard to replace.
Yeah. By the way, the name I was thinking earlier was Zaire Franklin for the Colts. Zaire Franklin was the name I was thinking about. Yeah, Drake Greenlaw would be great, but again, he also might be pretty expensive too. Who I don't know. He's a very talented player. He's a very, very talented player. I have no idea what the linebacker, again, contracts for linebackers are just wild, man. They are so many variables.
And 2 years ago, we saw that the grass is not always greener. We let Orlando Brown Jr. walk. We bring in Juwan Taylor. We're all convinced that he's going to be better. And there's some logic that says maybe we should have just stayed with the guy we had that we knew worked decently in our own system. I kind of have the same feeling here. Let's shift the cornerback. The starters, of course, are Trent McDuffie and Jalen Watson. They will both be back. Key free agents, Najee Johnson. I like Jalen Watson. My hope is that he was never his full self recovering from that injury during the playoffs, because in the Super Bowl, he definitely didn't look like himself. He got burnt some, and so did McDuffie. And I think some of that is the defense was really selling out to stop Saquon Barkley, and they were just on the damn field the entire game. And eventually they just kind of caved. They like held up as long as you could possibly expect them to. So I don't want to be overly critical of Jalen Watson because of that moment, but I think I would like him better as CB3 than CB2. Are you on the same page with me there?
Well, I just don't know if you can count on him because of all the injuries. Have some been freak, but is there such thing as a freak injury in the game of football? It's football. He has had a lot of injuries. He's played through a lot of injuries, but yeah, I think there needs to be. I would like to see a veteran and a draft pick in the cornerback room. You'll still have Joshua Williams, McDuffie, obviously, who I want an extension done ASAP, and then Jalen Watson. So you have those three guys. You have a nice group of three. Najee, I think, is done. And then you're left with the Chiefs, who tried to try everything, including Steven Nelson this year. I mean, I just think the Chiefs need some more depth. I would like, again, Kendall Fuller's a name I keep going back to. Travarius Ward's another name that I think could be fascinating. But one of those two veterans, I think, could be a good fit. We know schematically they are. And then I do think that a nice draft pick would be a nice replenish this CB cupboard, if you will.
Well, if history is any indication, I think they will probably go the draft pick route. I'm with you. Just extend Trent McDuffie now. I know that's going to break from precedent a little bit, because the Chiefs just famously have not brought back these guys, no matter how profile they are in the secondary. From Eric Berry to the Honey Badger to Juan Thornhill, Marcus Peters, Travarius Ward, and L'Jarius Sneed, none of them have been brought back. But I think the trend stops with Trent McDuffie, because he just, with Eric Berry and the Honey Badger, they were more at the end of their line, right? And Trent McDuffie is just getting started. Outside of Patrick Surtain Jr., I thought he was the best corner in the league last year. So there's no reason not to just go all in on him. And I don't know, get that cap hit down, make sure he's in Kansas City for the foreseeable future. My grade here, for Trent, I'm going to grade them separately. My grade for Trent McDuffie is an A+. My grade for everybody else is a C+. So if you want to call that a B+, maybe it's a B+.
Fair.
Okay. Some potential targets here. You mentioned a Charvarius Ward homecoming. So tragic situation. His 1-year-old Amani died. He suffered with PTSD there in the Bay, had a really hard time, sat out 3 games, came back, said he probably shouldn't have came back. Doesn't know if he can even return to that team and that city because of how tragic it was. He had a bit of a down year, but I think that's totally understandable. And the guy was a rock star in 2023 and 2022. If the money fits, I would love to have him back. I'm a huge Charvarius Ward fan. He's basically the same guy as L'Jarius Sneed almost, except he's been healthier, right? So I don't know if the Chiefs would do it, but I'd love it. I'm a big Kendall Fuller fan too. He's pretty damn old at this point. I think he's got to be at least 30, right?
Yeah. But
still, really good player. If he would come back to Kansas City cheap, maybe. Few other options here. Adebo Paulson from the Saints. He's interesting, man. He's 25 years old. He's shown some flashes. Sometimes he looks like the best player in the field. Sometimes he looks like the worst. But tall, long arms, can play press, 4.4 speed. Actually has a nose for the ball, which the Kansas City Chiefs could kind of use. I know it's not really exactly what they do. They're not the Dallas Cowboys from a few years ago. coaching guys to get interceptions or give up 80-yard touchdowns. But he's an interesting player that might be a fit because of the age. And then a reclamation project. I don't know if he fits, but I think it's always fun to try to steal other AFC West players. So Asante Samuel Jr., high draft pedigree. You could stick it to the Chargers. He's a poor tackler. Can Spags and Merritt fix that? And he's a little smaller than they like, but they've shown a willingness to go away from their like obsession with size with Trent McDuffie. But that might just be Trent McDuffie is a rare corner with short arms who's just awesome.
Yeah. Kendall Fuller, I see that question from ADG. Can Fuller play slot at this point? He has in his career traditionally. I just looked it up, but he's played very few snaps in the slot. He has played some safety, obviously, like he did in KC. He is a very versatile guy. I'm not saying he can't play slot. I'm just saying he hasn't really played slot in the past few seasons. I actually do forget. Did he play slot before he came to KC? I actually thought I remembered him being slot in Washington originally. I'll have to look that up at some point, ADG. That's a good call, but I just looked it up. He's not in the last 2 years. He's played very, very small amount of slot corner. So I don't know if he can or not. I don't know if the speed is still there. But I still think Kendall Fuller was a guy that the Chiefs actually, I don't know if they did or not, but I think they should have, and they maybe even did try to take a look at him this year around the trade deadline. I also just think that Travarius Ward's a really, really good player. I loved him in KC originally. If anyone who's been listening to Arrowhead Addict for a long time, Travarius Ward was one of my favorite players. Just the grind he took from undrafted guy to where he was to eventually culminating in a very large contract in San Fran. I just always liked how he was in the right spot, a willing tackler, did the little things, did not have great ball skills at all, but tried his best to make up for that. Again, he's kind of the same guy in San Fran, right? He's going to be a good tackler. He'll be in the right spot the majority of the time, right? I know everyone's going to always pull up clips because it's the freaking cornerback spot. It's impossibly perfect there. I just think he's a really solid corner. I would welcome back Travarius Ward with open arms.
In a heartbeat, man. And I've started digging a little bit on this draft class. Kind of my favorite positions to look at are usually offensive targets, your wide receivers and tight ends, and defensively corners and safeties. I really like this Darian Porter kid out of Iowa State. He's like every year there is a like prototypical Spags corner. Last year it was Andrew Phillips, who actually went to the Giants and was good. I really wanted us to get him. This year it might be this Porter kid. He's a converted wide receiver, pterodactyl arms, blazing speed, might run the 4.3s. Not a lot of tape at like high level tape at corner, but and he's a little bit older, but that's a name to remember. Put a pin in that. Let's finish up here with safety. Starters here are Brian Cook, Shamari Connor, and Jaden Hicks with a question mark. And then, of course, the key free agent is Justin Reed. I'm in total agreement with you. Letting both Justin Reed and Nick Bolton walk, both of your kind of defensive leaders on the field, the smartest two players on your defense. I just think for continuity's sake, you can't do that. And you're going to replace Justin Reed easier than you're going to replace Nick Bolton. Some of that is cost. Some of that is there's just more options at safety. So I think they're probably going to let him walk. I was a little frustrated with this group because I thought they were getting roasted frequently by tight ends, most notably, but also running backs, and they just always felt a little slow. And I honestly, I was disappointed in Shamari Connor. I thought he had just a knockout, sensational rookie year. They move him to the slot. Now, part of that's on the Chiefs. I just don't think he looks fast enough to play that position. I still have high hopes for Jaden Hicks. And then Brian Cook is just kind of what he is. He's a guy you can get away with starting, but I think on a weaker defense, he would be even more exposed. So I'm going to give this group a C. They ultimately didn't they weren't like an Achilles heel or anything, but they certainly weren't a strength. What are your thoughts on the safety unit?
Yeah, by the way, I see that super chat. I'm going to get to that just after I answer this question here. So appreciate that essay flip. We'll get to that in 1 second. Yeah, I thought Justin Reed actually had a really nice year. I thought Justin Reed had a great year. I thought his coverage improved actually this year. I know you disagree. That's fine. I thought Justin Reed actually had a nice year this year. Chamari Connor was, again, I'm with you. He was not put in the best possible spot. He's not a slot guy. He's not quick enough. I said it when he came out of college. It was one of those situations where we go, he is a safety. Like everyone kept saying, well, is he going to be like L'Jarius Sneed? Go, L'Jarius ran like a 4.3 or 4.4. Chamari ran a bad 4.5 or 4.6, right? I mean, it was a pretty noticeable difference. He wasn't going to be quick enough, and we saw that. His tackling was questionable at times this year as well, which didn't look great. Still think Chamari Connor, though, can be a useful piece on this team, right? I'm not saying he's not useful, but I think the Chiefs didn't always put him in the best possible spot. Not saying I know more than them. That's not what I'm saying. I just think we saw him in the slot, and we kept asking for more. Brian Cook, you're right. I feel bad because the injuries have almost taken a toll, especially on the growth that he was showing, because he was kind of in the similar boat there.
It's Juan Thornhill all over again, really.
It really is Juan Thornhill 2.0, which is it's just a bummer, man. And then Jaden Hicks we'll see more of as we saw more at the end of the year. I think he could be a really useful piece. It looks like Jaden Hicks would be the replacement for Justin Reed. The issue I would bring up here is not even an issue, just a thought process here, is the Chiefs like having a veteran safety. They've had a veteran safety back there for a long time, whether it was Dan Sorensen or Eric Berry or Tyrann Mathieu. Like they really value, and then Justin Reed, they really value having a veteran, not all veterans, a veteran back there in the safety group. So if that's not Justin Reed, does that mean they're going to bring in another veteran, or are they ready to say, hey, it's time to flip it. Let's get younger. Let's get hopefully a little quicker back there. We'll see, but this would be a change of pace. I know we always talk about they don't really pay a lot of safeties. I almost push back and say they pay one safety. They really have paid one safety. Whether it was Eric Berry or Tyrann Mathieu or Justin Reed, they do pay one. They just typically don't pay a second contract here in KC.
That's right. And you and I just see Justin Reed differently. I never thought coverage was his strong suit. I think he lost his step when he was playing against younger, more explosive guys like Kyle Pitts, like Brock Bowers, like Isaiah Likely. I thought he was exposed. But it might be a moot point, because if the past is prologue, the Chiefs walked away from Eric Berry and Tyrann Mathieu to sign a younger veteran at safety, a guy more in their mid-20s than in their late 20s. That's an established track record. I don't know if they'll do that again, but I think they might. I think everyone might be sleeping on this because their past actions have shown us Steve Spagnuolo really values a veteran safety still in his prime speed-wise. So some options here. Javon Holland from the Dolphins, probably too pricey, coming off a little bit down of a down year, but he's pretty much a star. He's a very good player. Then you have Talanoa Hufanga from the 49ers. I think people would love him in Kansas City. He's similar to Justin Reed. The problem here is ACL 2 years ago, wrist tendon injury, something like that this year. Can't seem to stay on the field. Could the Chiefs get him at a discount and just hope that things come back to the mean injury-wise? I don't know,
man. I think he's going to still get paid, dude.
You think so?
I love Hufanga. He's an all-pro when healthy. He's one of, I think a team will take a shot on him. I do. Maybe I'm wrong, but maybe it is too many injuries, but I still think he'll probably get one more chance to get a pretty big contract.
I tend to agree with you. I think the injuries probably cost him 10 to 20% of what he was set to make, but I still think he'll be one of the highest paid guys. And these next two guys I'm really interested in will not cost as much as him, but I think they probably have a little bit more speed, both of them, than Justin Reed at this point. You have Cameron Bynum from the Vikings, 26-year-old. I think he's just solid all around. And then you have Trayvon Merrick from the Raiders. Again, it's fun to steal from AFC West competitors. He's a versatile former Jim Thorpe winner back in college at TCU. When I look at the Raiders and I look at players leaving the Raiders, I was looking at Malcolm Kuntz too at edge. who I think is a really good player, but he might be a little small for Spags. He's about 250. I always ask myself, did the Raiders squeeze everything out of this player? I just don't trust them to do that. Like, I do not trust that organization to coach these guys up and put their players in a position to succeed. Do you?
No. By the way, the super chat from SA Flip 969, again, appreciate the super chat there, says, hey fellas, let me pick your brains. What's more important, sacking the QB or covering a wide receiver? For me, it's pretty easy. It's sacking the quarterback. And the reason is, if you sack the quarterback, that means you covered the wide receiver. I get it's a two-way street here, but overall, I think a great edge rusher can alleviate some of the concerns in the one great edge rusher, right? Can help 2 or 3 corners, right? One great corner doesn't always help the edge rushers. They can help to an extent, but then you have to worry about the other corner or the safety or the guy in the slot. So for me, it's sacking the quarterback. There's always going to be exceptions to the rule, right? Like Revis Island when Revis was doing his thing, or Nnamdi Asomugha when he was not an Eagle, but Nnamdi Asomugha originally. Like there are always going to be exceptions. The guys that can take away half the field, and you're like, man, that's just ridiculous. But the majority of the time, it's going to be sacking the QB over covering a wide receiver. Good question, though.
When you think about those old corners, for a lot of them, the rules were different. They could get away with more. Things weren't as spread out. There wasn't as much motion. So it's just a different game now. I would say that the discrepancy between how important a pass rusher and how important a corner can be has even grown. And the other point I make is your secondary, particularly your corners, are a weak link system. So it doesn't matter if Trent McDuffie is surgically stapled to Nico Collins, if Najee Johnson gets beat by Xavier Hutchinson or whoever fast. It doesn't matter. But if Chris Jones blows up a play in less than 2 seconds, it doesn't matter who's open. Nobody's open, right? So I'm with you. And I would say, like, elite pass rusher, interior or exterior, we're seeing that these interior guys nowadays can be as effective. Maybe they don't rack up the sacks, but interior pressure bugs a lot of quarterbacks more than exterior. Maybe not Mahomes, but Tom Brady is one of those guys who just hated interior pressure, right? So, well, that's all we got for the defense. Like I said before, we're going to be digging into, I think, a more comprehensive free agent preview, definitely more comprehensive look at the draft. For sure.
Oh, SA Flip, that's so good. That is outstanding. Second part question. So don't sign McDuffie over Karlaftis. Tricked you. Okay, here's where I said the caveat, though. I did say there's exceptions to the rule. I think McDuffie is on a different level than Karlaftis. But I also pointed out yesterday with Briscoe, I think Karlaftis is vastly important to this team, almost on the same level. Importance level, I think McDuffie and Karlaftis are actually very close for KC, because without Karlaftis, the edge rushers in KC it's brutal. But I will also point out, without the cornerback McDuffie in that room, cornerback room's not looking too good right now because of the injuries and step back to Watson from what we saw, and kind of the inability of Williams to have consistency. I think McDuffie is one of the best corners in the NFL. Well, I think Karlaftis might be in that second or third tier of edge rushers. But I think the Chiefs could sign both of these guys, and I think they will probably get it done. McDuffie might get an extension done this year, and Karlaftis maybe next year.
I think you're right on that. And Trent McDuffie is an A+ player. George Karlaftis is a B player. He's very good, but Trent McDuffie, especially, he's played in the slot. He's been an All-Pro there. He's basically played like an All-Pro, even though he wasn't named one, on the outside. Cornerback is the biggest roller coaster position there is, and he's basically immune to the dips that other corners have. Just lock that guy up. But I actually think both of them will be back, unless George Karlaftis just has a really rough fourth year. I'd expect him to stay in red and gold.
I think it's the opposite. I think if Karlaftis has like a 14-sack season, I don't think the Chiefs will be able to keep him. If I were the Chiefs, I would both those guys. Get him now, because McDuffie is going to – if you wait and Sauce Gardner gets paid and Derek Stingley gets paid, those contracts in the cornerback room are about to explode. If that's the case, then McDuffie's going to get maybe even more than those guys. You want to get McDuffie done now before Sauce and Derek Stingley sign. Karlaftis, though, is kind of the same way. Karlaftis, edge rushers, they always get paid pretty handsomely. If Karlaftis, which he has shown the ability to stay healthy and be efficient and effective, play a lot of snaps, the Chiefs need that. If Karlaftis is getting 15 or 14 or 13 sacks even, he's going to get paid on the open market. So I'm always team get out in front of it early. I am team early.
The Philadelphia Eagles, that is one of the things that they specialize in is signing their guys early, making sure that they're around for the long haul and pushing that cap hit down the road.
Jordan Mailata, what if they would have waited on Jordan Mailata? He would be a $28 million a year at least left tackle. He ain't though right now. They were so smart on getting out in front of Jordan.
Right. And the scary thing with Trey Smith this year is if a desperate team that has $120 million like the Patriots decide to pay Trey Smith $28 million a year just because they can and they're that desperate for line help. I mean, so you're right. And getting ahead of Creed Humphrey was one of the smartest things they've done in the last 2 years. Not having to worry about the best center in the NFL ever hitting the market. I don't want to see him in another jersey. So, Sterling, our last segment here, let's get ourselves out of here and our chat out of here. But what are you listening to? What's spinning?
Red Clay Strays, little bit of a little country. I wouldn't call it red dirt, but really good country band. Heard him recently and really liked him a lot. I've been listening to him a lot over the past few days. A song called Drowning, which is incredible. Almost sounds a little bit Chris Stapleton-esque. And then a song called Stone's Throw, which sounds completely different, but both just very, very good songs. I've just been putting them on, listening to them the past few days, and I'm like, oh, this is newer and kicks a lot of ass. Big fan.
All right. I'll have to check that out. For me, so I said something in a few other shows, but I'm about to move to LA here in about 3 weeks, move back to Los Angeles. And, a Midwest guy moving to Hollywood, there's a song about that, and it's Hollywood Nights by Bob Seger. Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band. I'm a big Bob Seger guy. Turn the Page, the list goes on and on. But I've been listening to some Hollywood Nights on repeat. Fun song.
Getting ready for all the night moves.
All the night moves. I don't know about that. I'm kind of old at this point, but Night Moves, that's a good album, man. So a good song, good album. I am down with Bob Seger. Also, just always looking so cool with the long hair and the beard and everything on his album covers. Love it. All right, guys, if you dig Arrowhead Addict, here's how you can help our community grow. First thing you can do is subscribe to this YouTube channel. That will help us out. That makes sure you never miss a show. We're giving you four shows a week, the Intangibles, the OG Hour, Tuesdays with Sterling, and right here on Wacky Wednesday, and some shorts and some other things. Like last year, we did the top 50 Chiefs of all time. We did a special series. We do stuff like that. You don't want to miss it. Subscribing will make sure you don't. You can also check us out if you're an audio listener on Spotify or Apple. Please leave us or consider leaving us a 5-star review there. That will also help us out. Did we hit 400 on Apple yet? I'm not sure.
Yeah, like 406, I think is where we're at. Yeah. Oh,
okay.
Awesome. Let's hit 500. Road to 500.
Road to 500.
Talking about Patrick. Let's talk about Wacky Wednesday. Let's talk about Tuesdays with Stu. More reviews, 5-star reviews for the fellas.
Hey, couldn't have sold it better myself. And if you ask a question in that review, we will answer it on the OG Hour with Patrick and either myself or Verderam. As always, be sure to check out the mothership, arrowheadaddict.com. Matt Connor, too many Matts. Matt Connor and the gang over there are really going to be all over the draft, all over free agency. They already are. So, Price Carter has his big board up on the site, our resident draft expert. Be sure to check that out. Thanks to the chat. You guys always bring it here at Rush Hour on Wednesday. We will be back here at the same time next week. Until then, go Chiefs.